Well, good evening. This is Proposition 68 meeting in regards to the Sylmar Recreation Center. And today is Thursday, November 12th, 2020. And this meeting is being hosted by the Los Angeles Department of Rec and Parks in partnership with Council District 7, Council Member Monica Rodriguez. This Zoom meeting is actually being broadcasted and live streamed on Facebook. So you can actually click on the link and Yumi will have that link available for you. Once this meeting is over, we will upload this meeting on YouTube. So you can watch that at your convenience, tomorrow. And just to go over some meeting guidelines, in your chat box, you will also see a link to a sign-in sheet. And I encourage you to actually begin signing in. And this is actually very critical for this grant proposal, that we have documentation that you have been part of this process. Also, later on, we're going to have a question and answer session. So what we would like you to do is, if at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to actually write those questions in the chat box. If you are happen to be a Spanish speaker, feel free to write in Spanish. We will translate that as well. And once we get to the question and answer session, we'll go ahead and read all the questions that were provided and have those answered by our staff. And at the end of the presentation, we'll also have a survey for you to complete, just to find out how we can best improve on these presentations. So today's panelists include Juan Solario. He's the Sylmar Area Director from Office of Councilmember Monica Rodriguez. We have also Daryl Ford, the Superintendent from Rec and Parks Planning, Construction, and Maintenance. We have Yumi Sangen, Management Assistant from Rec and Parks Grants Administration. And I'm Stephen Tran, the Senior Management Analyst from Rec and Parks Grants Administration. Translating for us is Jorge Rodas from Barbier. And to go over the meeting agenda, first we'll have an opening remark from Juan Solario, and then I will go over, give you an overview of Prop 68. Then Daryl Ford will present the project scope. We'll have our question and answers, and then we'll have our survey and our meeting. So you may be wondering why we have this meeting. This meeting is here to inform you of this funding opportunity, which is a Proposition 68 grant opportunity. We are going to resubmit a grant application for the fourth and final round of Proposition 68 grant. Last year we submitted one, it was not successful, so we are going to resubmit again this year for another consideration. We also want to present this updated project for funding. And we also want to solicit and get your community feedback on how you feel about this project. Now, this is actually one of multiple meetings that we've had. So last year, we held 5 community meetings for the first application that we submitted. And as part of that community engagement process, we basically involved 229 participants. So a total of 229 participants actually attended those 5 meetings. And Juan, actually before I begin, would you like to give an opening remark to the attendees?
Yes, thank you so much. And is it okay if I put on my camera just so folks see my face?
Oh, yeah, sir, certainly. We see your face.
Awesome. So on behalf of Councilwoman Rodriguez, I just everyone, the committee members that are here for today's meeting. It's really important when the city has opportunities like this where there's an opportunity to receive dollars and spend those dollars in a way that's really going to transform a community. And so I want to thank all the residents that are here. It's important, it's critical to participate in these processes where residents have the voice and the power to actually tell the city how they want those dollars spent. So I just want to thank everyone that's here on behalf of the community to be a part of this process. I also want to let folks know that we are here to service you and to provide you city services. So for folks that aren't familiar with our office or don't know where to contact us, I will be putting my information down in the chat box. Folks can reach us at our Sylmar district office at 818-756-8409. And folks can email me directly at Juan.Solorio at lacity.org, and I'll put that information in the chat box. And I also just want to thank the Rec and Parks Department and their team that are here today. This isn't the only meeting that they're at after hours working with the community. So I just want to thank you guys so much for facilitating the meeting and being such a great partner with the Councilwoman's office. So thank you, and I hope folks find this informative and really fun. Thank you.
And on behalf of RAP, thank you, Juan, for assisting us in setting this meeting and also doing outreach. So to give you an overview of where we are, so the Proposition 68 grant was enacted to create new parks and new recreation opportunities in critically underserved communities. The California voters approved Proposition 68 by 57% on June 5th of 2018. We are now in the final and round 4 for Prop 68. Prop 68 had 2 rounds, round 3 and 4. So this year is our last chance to apply for projects. That the total amount of grant money available is $395 million. This is a competitive grant, which means that we are going to submit a grant proposal and the state will decide on whether or not to provide funding. So this is, the funding is not guaranteed. The maximum grant request is $8.5 million. What that means is when we submit the grant proposal to the state, what we ask for can not be in excess of $8.5 million. So we will submit a budget with that application, and the budget must add up to a number that is 8.5 or less. Applications are due on December 14th of, I'm sorry, this is actually should be updated. It was December 14th, but the actual application deadline has been revised to March 12th of 2021. So we'll revise that and make sure that that's being edited out. But just want to remind that the actual deadline has been extended to March 12th of 2021. And if this grant is provided to us, the project must be completed by March of 2025. So what projects qualify for funding? So all of the Prop 68 projects must be capital projects. So what we're talking about, playgrounds, athletic fields, soccer fields, pathways, restrooms, public art, security cameras. We've had some inquiries on recreational activities and other things such as security services. And unfortunately, those types of services are not eligible for funding under Prop 68. Now, in order to be eligible, this application has to meet either one of two requirements. So within a half mile from the actual recreation center, we need to have less than 3 acres of parkland for 1,000 people, or less than $56,000 in median income. So we talked about this as being round 4. So last year we had round 3, and subsequently the state released some results as far as how many applications were received, and this, what applications were successful, the rate of success. So last year, 478 applications were received, totaling $2.3 billion. And last year, only about $255 million was available. The average grant proposal was asking for $4.8 million, and the average grant amount was $4.1 million. So even though we can apply up to $8.5 million, the state last year awarded the average grant to be about $4.1 million. What that means that out of the 478 applications received, we had 62 that were awarded. And out of the 62 projects that were awarded, 28 were for new parks, and 14 were for expansion of existing parks, and 20 were for renovations. So this particular project for Sylmar would be a renovation project. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the eligibility requirements, Sylmar qualifies because it has less than 3 acres for 1,000 people. And according to the state, we have 2.12 acres for 1,000 people. Now, because of the fact that the median household income is $61,000, it exceeded the $56,000 threshold, but we still do qualify because of the acres for 1,000 people. And at this point, I will turn the presentation over to Daryl Ford, our superintendent for planning, construction, and maintenance.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everybody. Again, my name is Daryl Ford. I'm the superintendent for the planning, construction, and maintenance branch here at the Department of Recreation and Parks. And as Juan said at the beginning, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy evenings to be with us here tonight at this presentation. We're excited to talk to you once again about Sylmar Recreation Center and the improvements that we'd like to submit a grant for to get funded from the state. So just briefly before we dive into what we're proposing to submit to the state, and again, as Stephen had noted earlier in this presentation, we did submit an application for this park last year, and we would like to very much pick up on a lot of the good work that was done in that application and move forward with a new one for this round. So just very briefly, I know we're all, I think in this call, probably very familiar with Sylmar Park, but just to set the stage for what we're talking about, just the slide before you on the screen right now, it's just a quick summary of some of the improvements, the various improvements that we have at Sylmar Recreation Center. We of course have the 4 baseball diamonds that are there. We have various picnic areas and walking paths through Sylmar. We have some fitness equipment that was installed at Sylmar, some of the outdoor exercise equipment that we have. We have 2 tennis courts at Sylmar and 2 basketball courts. And we also have a playground that's adjacent to the recreation center. And of course, don't want to forget that. We do have our Sylmar Recreation Center, as well as our Sylmar Pool. So those are the 2 major facilities we have there. Last but not least, and not shown at least on the aerial image that you have on the screen here, just updated, is, as we know, the recently completed synthetic turf field that's located on the southern side of the park, on the Astoria street side. So we do have that as our newest amenity at Sylmar Recreation Center. So again, just want to set the stage with some of the various improvements that we have and that we know of and that we love in the park. And then we'll talk a little bit now in the next slide about some of the things we heard in the last round when we met with the community to go over that application. So again, as Stephen had noted, back in 2019, when we were preparing an application to submit for round 3 of the Proposition 68 program, we had 5 community meetings and had over 200 people engaged in that community process. And through that community process, which helped us develop the final design that was submitted to the state, we got a lot of great input from the community about some of the improvements they wanted to see at Sylmar Park. So we thought we'd take just a couple minutes to talk a little bit about some of that feedback that we got for round 3, because of course, what we'd like to do is really build upon the good work that was done in that round as we prepare this grant application for round 4. So again, as you see on the screen here, just a quick summary of some of the major improvement items that were brought up during our community outreach for round 3. And you'll note on here, we had a lot of responses looking for sports field improvements and lighting in the park. We also had a large number of responses for restrooms, and I guess I'll talk a little bit about the restrooms as well. And again, shown on the screen, we had some for splash pads, some for pathways, and just a few for some tennis court improvements. So again, wanted to share with you just that, give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the input we got from the previous community outreach. And also, again, on the screen, you can see here some of the other things that were mentioned were improved security and lots of conversation about trees and shade. So certainly putting forth a new application for the site, we don't want to lose sight of the great feedback we got in the last round. So we wanted to make sure to share with you tonight. Again, just to maybe refresher for some of us who were in those meetings as well, talk about some of the items and some of the things we heard about during round 3. So moving forward, just want to show you on the next slide. Again, as by way of background, this is actually the scope of work that we had submitted in round 3. Now, just for clarity, because we're going to talk about it in a moment, we're going to submit for round 4, or we're proposing to submit a slightly different scope. But again, wanted to share with everyone, just as a way of background, what we had submitted for in the last round. So we had submitted to do a series of field improvements to upgrade all of those baseball fields at Sylmar, and as well as providing new bleachers that would be shaded, lighting and pathways to get to those bleachers, and actually a pathway to enhance the existing pathways around the park. We were proposing in the last application to provide an enhanced splash pad over by the pool. We were also proposing to build an amphitheater and community space. You can see on the exhibit in front of you, kind of a greenish blue circle that was going to go on the north side of the rec center. So again, just based on the feedback, an amphitheater or community space was proposed in that general area. We were also looking at adding a skate park. So there was a little bit of design work that went into this conceptualizing. The idea was to essentially relocate those basketball courts that are currently located adjacent to the parking lot on the northwest side of the park, closer to the synthetic turf field on the south side of the park, and to reuse that area over there for a new skate park. So that was a part of what we had submitted in the round 3. Additionally, we had proposed to remove the tennis courts that were in the park and to replace that area with a brand new covered picnic area. Now, we weren't proposing in the application that was previously submitted to replace those tennis courts elsewhere in the park, but we were proposing to have them removed and replaced with a new picnic area. And then again, finally, the idea was to create a network, a path of walking paths and a fitness trail, along with a lot of pieces of public art. And additionally, there was a volleyball court that we were proposing to put in there. Finally, in the last item I think is important to hit on is just a new restroom was proposed. You can see it slightly in the design just north of the synthetic field. So we do have that, again, that brand new synthetic field that was built at Sylmar Recreation Center, and knowing that restrooms is very high in the priority, we wanted to go ahead and apply for funding to build a new restroom in the park. So just wanted to give a very brief overview of what was proposed in the last round, just to set the stage for what we want to talk about applying for in this round. So moving forward in the presentation, the next slide is essentially, like we said, an update. We're really looking at this as another shot at applying for funds that we think are much needed and would be welcome at Sylmar Park. So I'm just going to briefly go through that updated scope of work that we'd like to apply for. Again, tonight's about hearing from you in the community to let us know if we're going down the right path, if we've identified the appropriate improvements to focus on, and to really to get your input. But we wanted to, again, start with the application we did for round 3 as the base and make some targeted changes to that application. And of course, share that with you tonight to get your feedback and input. So just walking slowly through the scope, we're still proposing to do a walking and jogging path through the park. It's important to note that this pathway beyond being there for you, the community, to recreate in the park, also would make sure that our park is fully compliant with all the new ADA, that's American with Disability Act, but the ADA requirements so that people have a safe path of travel to all the different amenities in the park. A new item that we're proposing to do in this scope of work is to demolish what we call what is called the Susan B. Anthony building. So if you're familiar with the park, just to the west of the Recreation Center building, between the Recreation Center building and the basketball courts, is an older building that is no longer used by the department. That building is called the Susan B. Anthony building. It's not currently programmed and not currently used by the department, and it hasn't been for many years. So we think that this is the appropriate time to have that building demolished as a part of this project. And we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about why we think that's a good idea to do. Again, beyond the building not being used, but why we think it's a good idea to fold that into this application. We're proposing to keep the amphitheater an outdoor performing arts space, which again was in the last application. We're still proposing to keep the baseball field improvements there. That would again be all new fields, lighting, bleachers, covered bleachers. So an overall enhancement of the baseball fields, still proposing to keep that. The new basketball courts, and again, similar to the last application, this would entail us relocating the basketball courts from their current location to a different area in the park. Proposing still, again, new picnic areas and barbecue spaces. A new restroom would be built to the park. And I just want to speak to this for very briefly. Again, we noted that restrooms are very high on the list of proposed improvements for the park. We wanted to let you know that we were actually successful in getting community development block grant funding for those new restrooms. So we actually already have funding to build a new freestanding exterior restroom in the southern portion of the park. So while you will see in this application that we are no longer asking the state to give us funding for that, that's only because we have been successful in getting community development block grant funding for that restroom. And I want to make sure to take a moment to, of course, thank Council District 7 for their hard work in helping us secure those CDBG funds. So we are planning to build a new restroom at Sylmar, not a part of this grant application, because we were able to fund it successfully through those community development block grant funds. And then again, just to hit on all the other items we're proposing to do, of course, upgrade the landscaping in the park, provide new lighting, including pathway lighting, to provide additional outdoor fitness equipment, to make necessary refurbishments to the parking lots. Part of that is just resurfacing those lots to make sure they're safe, but also to make sure they're fully compliant with folks for path of travel purposes, to provide multiple opportunities for new public art. Potentially this could be for murals or art walls. A lot of that is things that if we were successful in getting the grant, we would work further with the community to refine, but we want to make sure there's lots of opportunities for the community to provide new spaces for public art. Additionally, proposing to do renovations to the recreation center, including improvements to the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, to provide new shade structures throughout the park. The skate park, which is an item that was included in round 3. We are not proposing at this time to include it in a new application for round 4. And again, in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about why that is. And then finally, a new exterior volleyball court.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Okay.
We're getting to the next slide.
Okay.
So that was, again, just a brief summary of the scope items. And the slide in front of you now is actually an updated visual for those new items. And I'll once again kind of walk through what those items are, and you can see them here on the image. And you'll note, of course, it's very similar to what was proposed in round 3, but it's been updated to reflect some of those changes. So just going from, I'd say, let's go south to north on this orientation. So again, if you're familiar with Sylmar Park, starting to the south where the synthetic turf field is. So you'll see there at the south side, which would be on the left side of your screen if you're looking at this presentation online, is where the relocated basketball court would go. So it'd be very close to the new synthetic field that's there. You'll see on this noted the proposed restroom. So again, still proposing it in the same general location to be located near the synthetic turf field. But again, just for clarity, that will be funded through a different source. So we do have funding for that, regardless if the state awards us funding for this grant application. We do have funding to move forward with the restroom, but we wanted to make sure to show you on this conceptual schematic design where that restroom will be located. Again, moving through the park, we're still proposing to make the upgrades to the existing baseball fields, which again would include field improvements, lighting, bleachers, covered bleachers, and the pathways. You can see those pathways shown in yellow, kind of weaving throughout the park. Again, part of it is just to enhance the existing kind of fitness and walking path that's there, but also to make sure we're providing an appropriate path of travel for folks to be able to get through the park. Moving forward, we're also going to add a new volleyball court. You can see right in the middle of the design, a little kind of red square just to the south of the recreation center. That's the conceptual location for a new volleyball court. But north of there, I want to just draw your attention to, or west of there, excuse me, but towards the top of your drawing, just want to draw your attention to where the Susan B. Anthony building used to be located and the basketball courts currently are and the tennis courts currently are. So you'll see we're proposing to, again, demolish the Susan B. Anthony building and replace it with an open area, a green space area, potentially a picnic area. And we're again also proposing to remove the basketball courts and the tennis courts in this area and to replace that entire area with a new open space area that would include picnic tables, shade, and walking paths. So again, part of the thought process here is to just reorient the park and move some of those active improvements like the basketball court closer to the soccer field, but also to open up this space and provide an open space that in the long term could potentially be used for other things. So we thought this grant would be a good opportunity to reorient the park and reorganize some of the things in the park. And also again, to remove the old Susan B. Anthony building because it's not really doing anybody any use right there and to replace it with a good green space. Down the road, of course, this provides a lot of chances and opportunities for future improvements in this area. And we think, again, this grant would be a good opportunity to take a first step at reinvigorating this corner of the park. And then finally, just want to draw your attention to the proposed amphitheater area and community performance space. So it's still in the same general area that we talked about for round 3. You can see it kind of circular there. Again, the idea is to provide the community with a good space that could host and serve for multiple activities. And then again, finally, you'll see throughout the design, several shade structures kind of in a triangular pattern, just again for illustrative purposes, along with some of the art walls, which you'll see in red, located throughout the park. And again, this is all very conceptual. This is the idea for what we submit for the grant, but we're here tonight to hear from you with your thoughts and ideas about the park, but we wanted to share with you our first take on a schematic layout for the park based on the scope items we previously discussed. So that was it. Just wanted to move kind of briefly through what we're proposing for Sylmar Park for applying again for Proposition 68 funds. So we wanted to thank you all for taking the time out to listen to us tonight. And we're going to move on to the question and answer section. So we look forward to hearing any comments or questions you may have and answering any of those thoughts tonight. And again, we're here to hear from you to get your input. We want to make sure that your park, that the improvements we're doing in your park meet your community's needs and provide a more welcoming and opening space for everyone in your neighborhood. So looking forward to a good discussion.
Thank you, Daryl. So I'll leave this slide up for you to, for all our audience members to look during the question and answer. Okay. And we'll wait for a couple of minutes for the questions to come in. They're coming in through the Zoom and also through Facebook as well. Oops.
Stephen, I am seeing one question. What would it take to get approval for the grant?
What would it take well, what happens is, well, first of all, we have to meet the grant guidelines. So I went through some of the guidelines as far as, what are some of the items that we can include in a grant proposal. So the guidelines include essentially the grant ceiling, which is 8.5 million. There are also a number of other guidelines which are too lengthy to go through, but just to give you an idea of the process. So once we have this grant proposal together, we'll put together a budget. We'll include most likely some of these site plans that you're seeing, in our grant proposal. There, as a narrative portion. So we'll submit that, by the grant deadline. It will go to the state. The state will review. And at a certain point, like they did last year, the state will do a site visit. So most likely what they'll do is that they will do a site visit for every single application. Now this year, I'm just not sure what is going to happen because of COVID, but that's usually, the state's routine. Once the state does a site visit, it will then review all the applications and rank them according to its rating schematics. And based on the point value, some applications will be successful and some won't. I hope that sort of like answers, your questions. If you need, more details, just let me know.
A second question is asking, do you have any plans to add any additional parking spaces?
I'll go ahead and answer that again. This is Daryl Ford. So we don't have any plans to add any additional parking spaces or lots, or if that's really the question. If we're successful in getting the grant and getting funding to renovate those spaces may need to be restriped. So we'll have to revisit the striping of those, and just by that, of course, as everyone knows, just the striping of the spaces, just to conform and make sure that we have the appropriate amount of ADA spaces. But essentially, we're not proposing to add any new parking lots. It'll still be the same three parking lots. We have 3 parking lots at Sylmar. The same 3 parking lots, we would just make sure to resurface them and stripe them as needed. And there may be some addition or loss of 1 or 2 spaces when you do that, just again to make sure you have enough spaces for ADA compliance. But effectively, we're keeping the same footprint of all 3 of the parking lots that are there.
Thank you, Daryl. Another question is, when is the project slated to begin and the completion date? Well, what happens is that the deadline for grant proposals is March 12th of 2021. So we have to submit our grant proposal by then. And depending on how many applications are received and then depending on how long the state takes to review, it could be months. And by the time, assuming that we get a grant award, it would have to go through channels. We would have to have, a lot of signatories, a lot of people sign. So it's not inconceivable that actually, if we were to be successful, that we would have a grant award ready by, I would say, either late summer or fall, given the unique circumstances of this particular cycle, given COVID-19. So even though we have, seemingly 5 years, we actually don't. So it could be, possible for us to get a grant award by summer or fall. And once we receive the grant award, that's when we can start the actual project and get reimbursed for those expenses. And we need to have this project complete by March of 2025. So next question is, I know that guidelines, why was funding declined previously? Well, one of the reasons is because in one of the previous slides, the state received an overwhelming amount of applications, 478 applications, for a total grant request amount of $2.3 billion. And the total that it had to give out was 255 million. So there was a lot of competition. And because of the fact that there was so much need around the state, our application was compared with other applications, and that's what the state decided. So we're hoping that this round, because it has more funding available, that we will be successful. Let's hope. Yes, so just to clarify, the funding is not guaranteed. We are basically going to put together a grant proposal. We will submit, and we will compete with all the other agencies around the state, all the other eligible applicants for this funding. So yes, it's not guaranteed.
Another question asking, why are you removing tennis courts? How many tennis courts exist at the park?
Hi, this is Daryl. So I'll go ahead and chime in on there. So currently there are 2 tennis courts at the park. So the reason why we are proposing to remove them is, well, twofold. One, based on the input that we got at the last community meeting. So the tennis courts weren't very high on the list of amenities at the park. So that was one reason why. And the secondarily, as we were looking to add new open space areas and new picnic areas, the thought process was to replace those 2 existing tennis courts with that open space picnic areas, if in fact they weren't highly desired or utilized by the community. But all that said, the purpose of tonight is to tell us if we have that right or not. So it would be great to hear if there is another strong desire to keep the tennis courts. If there is, we certainly can revisit the concept that's in front of you today. Again, the idea behind the concept that you have was to open up that whole area of the park on that corner to just provide a more open space, and again, enable us down the road, down in the future, to revisit things that could be put there. But again, if there's a strong desire to keep the tennis courts or potentially even relocate tennis courts, tonight's the night for us to hear that, or in any feedback you give us post this meeting, it'd be great to hear and understand from the community if there's a strong desire to keep those tennis courts. But that was our thought process behind removing them from the park, and this is currently designed. But again, if that's not something the community is supportive of, that's what we want to hear.
Thanks, Daryl. So there was a question, was there any parks in San Fernando Valley approved? If so, which one? So the one that was approved was a brand new park called Allegheny. Bokov has his hands up. Is there a way to allow participants to speak during the small number of participants?
Sorry, this is Daryl. I was just going to say, we're just doing questions through the Q&A. So if it's easier to just put your questions through the Q&A, that would work out best for us. And also that would enable the translation services as well. But if we can just provide the questions through Q&A, that would work best. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Was there any parks in the San Fernando Valley approved? It's okay. So yes, Allegheny. Thanks, Bill.
Hi, and Stephen, I just was going to chime in there for that one. Just for everyone's reference, Stephen had noted that we did get it, and we did get a project awarded in the last round, which is on Allegheny Street. So if you're, just to give a more frame of reference, it's in the Sun Valley area of the San Fernando Valley. So we were approved for a brand new park to be developed on some parcels that the city had recently acquired on Allegheny Street, very near the intersection of Sheldon and San Fernando Road. So Allegheny is maybe a block or 2 south of Sheldon Street. So if you're familiar again with Sheldon and San Fernando Road, it's in that area of Sun Valley. So it's a brand new park that we will be building on Allegheny Street in that portion of Sun Valley, just to provide a little context for where that project is.
Yes, and Bill Jones had basically provided you with a few more details on the chat box. Next question, why are we removing tennis court? How many tennis courts exist?
Stephen, I believe Daryl already addressed that question.
Okay, sorry about that. I just, there are two screens that I'm trying to keep track of. Did he also answer the pool question?
No, Daryl, is there a pool? And if yes, what size?
Oh, okay. This is Daryl. I don't know the size of the pool, but there is a pool that we already have at Sylmar Recreation Center, but I do not know right here what the size of it is. But we do have an outdoor swimming pool at Sylmar Recreation Center, as well as a adjacent splash pad. Neither of those are proposed to be modified in this grant application. Those are existing facilities. And if you're, sorry, just for the, also for the everyone who's viewing the presentation, if you're looking at the screen here, the pool's located right kind of in the middle of the screen. It doesn't have any water in it in this image, so you kind of see an open white area just to the south of the baseball fields, but if you're thinking geography-wise, to the east. So right there in the middle, kind of in the middle of the drawing, is where the pool is located in the adjacent splash pad. Just doesn't stick out because there's no water in it, but there is a pool somewhere.
I think there was a follow-up. Is the pool for lane swimming?
We can follow up with the program that's there, but yes, the pool does have swimming lanes.
So just another question is, if funds are declined, any other means of getting funding in the future to make this happen in our community? So the answer is yes. As Daryl mentioned earlier, we did get some community block grant, which is federal funding for the restroom. So as a result, we do have other funding available from the federal government. We also have funding from the county as well, through Measure A, that we can apply to for, to have these amenities be constructed in case, we don't get Prop 68.
And this is Daryl Ford again. I just want to chime in on that. So again, as noted and Stephen had repeated, we did get community development block grant funds for the proposed restroom. But it is always important to note that just like with these Proposition 68 funds, a lot of these funding sources are very competitive. So some of them are competitive grant application sources. Some of them are funds that the city has to decide and determine through a variety of project needs across the city where to put those funds. So with any other, with all funding sources, I think these are difficult times to identify the appropriate amounts of funds. But I wanted to just stress one thing that's super important for this presentation, which is Proposition 68 is our best source of funding, getting a large amount of funding for a project. So again, as we talked about earlier, we can apply for a maximum of $8.5 million under Proposition 68. None of the other funding sources that we're talking about, Measure A or CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Funds, or others, really provide funding in that magnitude. So Proposition 68 is a real opportunity to find a significant amount of money to do a lot of improvements. But again, if we're not successful, we can work collectively like we always do to cobble together from a variety of funding sources funding to do improvements in the park, but it would be much smaller and more targeted improvements that would take us longer. We do think Prop 68 is a great opportunity to try to get as much funding as we can and a large amount of funding up front to do everything at once.
Thank you. I guess there was a question about the pool. Is the pool heated?
I think what we can do, sorry, again, Daryl Ford. We don't have anyone from our operations folks on the meeting, but I don't know if Stephen or you, if we can just provide the direct link to the Sylmar Recreation Center website with the aquatics facility, because I know that a lot of the information is on there. So while we're on this Zoom call, let me see if I can find that link, and maybe I'll post it in the chat myself.
Yes, thank you. Are there kids programs for practicing? And so, yes, that link will give you that information as well. Because the city has a website for every park. So your answer will, those provisions and those amenities will be provided in that link. Yumi, do we have any questions from Facebook?
I have not seen any questions from Facebook currently.
Okay. So we wait a couple of minutes to see if anybody wants to have a question answered.
Hi, Stephen. This is Bill Jones. I do want to remind all of our participants and even those that may view the video afterwards that on Facebook you can still submit questions even after the presentation has concluded, and that we will do our best to answer those questions in a timely fashion. That is just to allow those that were not able to participate this evening an opportunity to still provide input and ask questions about the project or the grant application. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So from Juan, did RAP want to engage participants with feedback on specific amenities? Good luck and thank you for all this meeting. Designs look very nice. I hope the proposal will be granted. Thank you very much.
I am seeing another question down below. Can courts and fields be booked for tournaments?
Actually, the best way to find out is to actually access, to click on the link. And if the information is not available on the website, we do have a recreation staff at that center that can answer all your questions with regards to whether the pool is heated or the specific programs and registration. Yeah, sorry, we don't have a specific staff member among the panelists. But thank you for asking.
And hi, Stephen and everybody, just to note, if you're watching this or participating on the Zoom, I did provide the links in the chat for all attendees. So hopefully for those website links, as Stephen noted, you can directly get to our staff and has their direct contact numbers in those websites for your specific questions about the programming that are provided at Sylmar Rec Center.
So I don't see any more questions. Okay.
Hey, Stephen, I'm sorry, it's Daryl. I did
Yeah.
want to just chime in and just say, again, as Bill Jones had noted, that we'll continue to get your comments and feedbacks and reply to everyone. But Would like to hear if there is more, and again, maybe anyone watching this now or later, or anyone you speak to about this meeting, just to give us some more feedback again on the concept that's before you. I know we had some questions tonight about the tennis courts, so really would like to hear if there is additional interest in the tennis courts, or maybe even any concern about removing those, as well as any of the other amenities that we're proposing to do. Again, the relocation of the basketball courts or the new amphitheater, or any of the other improvements. If there are specific questions, comments, concerns, issues, you like them, you don't like them, those all the kind of feedback we want to get before we finalize and prepare an application to send it forward to the state. So really, I'm looking forward to any feedback that we get from you either tonight or in the near future, so that we can, again, we want to make sure we're putting together a design and putting forth a design that's reflective of what everyone in the community wants. So we appreciate everyone being here tonight, of course, and then any additional feedback you can give us. If you think of it to now, if you think of it later, that's what we're here for, is to hear from you.
Thanks, Daryl. And so as just want to remind everybody that we have a survey link in the chat box. And if you would like to, we would ask you to just fill out the survey to find out what you felt about the meeting. And you certainly are able to leave any comments in the survey. Okay. Okay, so Daryl, we're going to conclude the meeting. We hope that this meeting was informative for you, and that you've learned a few things about the proposal that we will submit to the state. Please feel free to provide further feedback through the survey. We will, if you leave us any questions or any feedback, we'll try our best to get back to you. And have a great evening and a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everybody.